Okay, today is gonna be, I guess, somewhat something I normally do, but it's gonna be a different subject. It's gonna be landscape, night street. So rather than doing something based on nature, it's gonna be completely different. If you've taken any form of drawing lessons, this part should be fairly familiar. Starting with the horizon line, you add points of intersection for perspective. Basically, this is going to be representative of where the road leads, and it is a shortcut to adding 3 dimensions. I use my palette as a ruler to keep the line straight. Depending on what you're going for, it's better to use a straight edge and not freehand it. I'm going for at least semi-realism, but if you're going for a more abstract look, you could benefit from freehanding. The sketch I made was really just a reference because the paper is a different size of the canvas, and I was just gonna use it as a basic guideline. I wasn't gonna do one-to-one. With stuff like this, I find it easier to not rely too heavily on a reference. Just use it as a guideline. The actual painting part seems a lot easier than it actually is. You get tempted to do one color per side and then have different hues based on where the lighting is. But in reality, somewhat based on the lighting, you want to keep one side, which is the sharper edge, a bit deeper or a bit more highlighted than another side. That way, when the two buildings meet each other, it's not like they meld into one building. Because this is a night street, I used blue as the primary color and added some orange to make it a little bit more mute, and a touch of black to deepen it. It's a bit hard to see with the camera, but the sides I added a little bit more layer to did change the color, so I used a little bit more of the paint on the left side than on the right. And then I used a bit of white to mix in with the paint while it's still wet to change the hue somewhat. It's important when you're drawing inorganic shapes like buildings that you keep the brush steady and keep a straight line. I have extra shaky hands, so it was a bit more of a challenge for me, but it shouldn't be a challenge for most people. I wanted to add a kind of skyscraper in the background, so I kind of muted the color down, that way it faded in a bit more, and made sure that when I drew it to the intersection line, that the slope at the top was a bit of a sharper slope. Remember when doing perspective that you maintain consistency with bringing the 3-dimensional line into the intersection. This is called the vanishing point. Buildings on the left and on the right, I wanted them to have redder neon lights, so the color I used to do the actual building itself had blue, but also mixed in a little bit red to shift the hue to a more warm color because I wanted it to be lighted by the neon near it. It's a bit more clear on these ones on the right than they are in the middle or on the left, that I started off with a deeper color, and then I added some white to add some highlights, and then I added the placeholders for where I'm going to add the neon lights. It's a rough sketch to start. I didn't really focus too hard on getting it precise because the colors are going to start mixing, and I'm just putting stuff down there so that I know where I'm going to put stuff. To not make the sidewalk blend in with the buildings, I started adding a lot more orange to it so that it grayed out the color more. And then for the cracks and such, I deepened one side and then brightened another side. I could subtly increase the contrast between each plate of concrete. Since it's the first time I've actually done a road, I actually found a trick in the process. By scrubbing some of the paint off in the middle, I ended up adding some depth to it. I was already planning on making it rugged, and that was kind of an easy shortcut to it. It even mixed some of the paint on the canvas too. Highlights go a long way in bringing out depth, so I kind of just mainly used white and added some of the color that mixed in to do the highlights. Because I didn't really know what to do with that part in the end, I just decided to fill it with color, and it ended up actually looking not too bad. Adding a telephone wire in for flavor. I was able to use the paint knife to just throw the paint on there and mix it around until it felt right. It's way more efficient than just picking it up with the brush and moving it. Rather, it's easier just put the paint there and move it around whenever you need it. I wanted it to be dark, but not blend in with the buildings. So I did mix in a little bit more orange to gray it out, and then more white to kind of make it a little bit brighter around certain edges, but not bright enough to where it would look like daytime at all, or conflict with the rest of the vibe of the painting. With a little bit of white on my cloth, I wiped it down a little bit to add a little bit of depth. Now it's just on to adding a little bit of the finer details, like adding some poles, adding some extra definition to the building, and so on. Next is adding the neon lights to symbolize the sign. Simple in concept that the white is the light, and then you use some of the color to surround it. That way it looks like it's glowing. But you gotta make sure not to mix them, and you gotta be careful because the colors can change color, like red becoming pink or blue, or the white no longer being blue, but just being more blue. This same lesson sort of carries over when doing the road, in that I started off with the white to add some extra shine to it, and then to mix in the color of the lights, I added some of like a almost orangish red. It was still too bright though, so I wiped it away and then added a little bit more white where I needed the glow to be, and then I wiped it away again. Then added more color, then added more of like the road color, and then through this sort of like trial and error, kind of just working your way to what you want. Not the most elegant solution, but if it works, it works. Next, it was to add more details to the buildings so that they didn't look completely flat, like adding extra depth to one of the buildings and adding a garbage bin. It was just the final details and rounding out anything that I felt was incomplete. Adding more hues to the building to add more depth and more texture to it, just little bits. Alright, thank you for watching.